So stereotype annotations are important to create your MVC objects like controller, service, repository, component, along with them any third-party object like data source is a connection pool implementation, right? Data source is a connection pool interface. For this interface there are a lot of third-party implementations. So those are already implemented and given in the form of binaries to us. Just you need to use those classes here in @bean method, and you should initialize them so that whenever you load your application, into IOC, right, you know that IOC is similar to server, which is going to create all your Spring objects. First it will start initialization from configuration, then inside configuration whichever @bean methods you have, those @bean methods will be executed, and whichever you return, right, those return values as a objects it will register. All these objects will be registered into application context. Okay, so application context is having control over all these objects. It can play with all these objects. Okay, playing means what? I have classes which are having dependencies. Controller is having dependency of service, service is having dependency of repository, right? Likewise I have many dependencies across my application. As this application context is holding all these objects, if you put auto wired, sir, I need REST template object or service object in my controller class. Let's auto wire it. What it will do? Whichever object is available with application context, right? Your service object, it will automatically auto wire into your controller. I mean, whichever object you mentioned here, I have something A service that is required in A controller. If I configure A service with auto wired, automatically your A service object will be auto wired into A controller. Similarly, I have dependency of DAO into service. So these DAO objects which are created under repository will be automatically given to service. So all objects it will create as well as it will connect them as well. It will create objects and it can connect objects by using auto wiring. So simple. Using stereotypes, application context will create objects. Using auto wired, it will connect that objects. Okay. Now coming to connection pool implementation. Why it is so important to use connection pools here? If you don't have connection pool, the problem is when you have so many users, when you have many users requesting the application, right? Usually if it is a web application, lot of end users may call at the same time, right? So in peak time you will get so many requests to your application. If you use simple connection implementation logic here in your repository, what will happen? It may not quickly open connections from your database and close them. Usually if you use simple connection mechanism, what will happen? Let me show you. Simple connection mechanism, if I use instead of connection pool, sir, here I have many users, they are requesting many users. For a CRUD operation, consider many users are using this application and they are hitting almost at the same time. Okay, I am getting so many requests here. So this request passing through view calling controller, controller to service, service to DAO. In this DAO class I have used a simple connection implementation. Okay, let's see. If I have used just imagine the implementation here in repository. I used a simple connection mechanism. I have a CRUD operation method here, save method. Under that save method, if you are doing this class dot for name and loading your driver class here, I'll increase the font size. Okay, so I am loading driver class, then opening connection, getting connection equal to driver manager dot get connection. Then you will be executing some statements here, insert statement. Finally you will be closing connection here, connection dot close. So this is very important. Closing resources is very important. I am done with my job. I have completed CRUD operation. So you need to return connection back to your database. So this is direct way of creating connection and utilizing it. So in this scenario, what I am doing, I am directly using the connection. From my database, I am directly using connection. So if this database is having maximum 20 connections, okay, if I have maximum to maximum 20 connections here, just keep some maximum count. I have 20 connections here, and many users are requesting from the front end. Many users are requesting from front end for doing CRUD operations, inserting their records through this application. So I'm using simple driver manager dot get connection mechanism and closing it. So usually in this scenario, what will happen, to open connection from database, when you use driver manager dot get connection, first it will open connection. It will be opening connection, and once you're done with your job, when you call connection dot close, it will return connection back to your database when you call connection dot close. Okay, connection dot close, it will return your connection back to database. Opens connection and finally closing connection. Between, when you execute insert statement, it will insert record into table. Insert record. So usually this is what happens when you use simple connection, right? Simple connection based code. Simple connection based code, when you use, this is what going to happen. First it will open connection for you, and it will execute your required input statement, in statement or whatever, select statement. Finally, once you're done with your job, you need to close your statement, close your connection. So this entire cycle will take some time to open connection, because Oracle is a different software, maybe running in the same machine or a different machine. Usually we maintain databases in different machine over the network, right? Database is going to having sensitive information. We may don't want to lose that information, right? I may keep my database into a separate machine where I have full security to the database and database backups I'm taking. Okay, so I have a different machine for Oracle, there I am running it, and my application is running in a different IP, different machine. So to get connection from the database and to close connection to the database via network, right, your request need to travel. There must be network delay sometimes between your application and database, that may impact performance. So there is a network time to open connection to close connection, and some time may take to insert the record. Anyway, we can't avoid this inserting records or selecting records. We may not avoid the time for insertion or updation or deletion or selection, but if you take lot of time to open connection and to close time, is it really useful for multi-user application where they are calling application dynamically by many users? Maybe this solution not recommended. Opening direct connections and closing connections on database when I have multiple users requesting my application. What is the problem? As I said, I have maximum 20 connections here. As I said, I have maximum 20 connections into this database. At a time, if I get here users count, if I get users 1000 users, okay, so if I get 1000 users, for first 20 users it will serve connection properly. The remaining 980 users will get the exceptions saying that there is no connection available, because dynamically lot of users requested. So to open connection time, it will take to open connection it will take some time, to execute statement and to return connection back to database it will take some time. Then database need to feed that record, okay, I received connections back, so that I need to free up and return to the next users. So database will take some time to arrange that connections as free and to return to other users. But your application can't hold them. As 20 users requested, 20 connections are available, okay, purpose is done. But when 1000 users requested, only for first 20 users it will serve connections, the remaining users will start getting exceptions. The remaining 980 users will get exception saying that connections are refused, no connections are available, connections are getting refused because connections are not available. So if you want to see example, let's see. I'll prove this, okay, I'll be proving this. What is the problem with simple connection? Just a minute. Okay, let me create a project. Simple JDBC example I'm going to show you. Finish. Okay, simple JDBC. I'll connect with Oracle database and show you problem. You can add library OJDBC 14, right? Oracle connector. I'm just adding Oracle connector here. Simple core logic I'll put here, you can see. Simple JDBC test. Okay, let me create try catch because it will throw always compile time exception class dot for name oracle dot jdbc dot oracle driver connection con equal to driver manager dot get connection jdbc colon oracle colon then localhost 1521 colon exe system admin, a simple JDBC logic. And using this, let me fetch some record, create statement, execute query, select a star from RBU experts, result set, I'm doing simple select operation. You may do simple insert operation also and verify. Okay, while rs dot next. So here if you want to try insert also, you may try insert. So I'm not sure how many records I have in this database. Let me verify. So I have 3 records: ID, name, email address. Let me check. I'm just fetching name of each expert and print it. System.out.println name. Bus. And finally I'll be closing all the resources. rs dot close, statement dot close, and connection dot close. All the resources properly, we should close it. Okay, so this is executing for only one time. I may not expect any issues. This may go well and showing all the names: Archana, Christopher, Ravi, whatever I have. What happens if the same logic is utilized where many users are hitting this method? The same logic, consider you have in your DAO public void fetch users. Inside DAO you have such a method and this method called by multiple users. 1000 users are executing now. How? I'll create a for loop int I equal to 0 to I less than 1000 times I plus plus. I'll call this fetch users for 1000 times. So I'll be calling JDBC test dot fetch users. And here in this exception I'll print exception trace also. I'm definitely expecting exceptions. Run this 1000 times. I'm trying to executing this method. Will it executes or not 1000 times? See, executing, getting exceptions. What is happening? Is 1000 times properly executed? If I see log, that is not happening here. Oracle SQL exception, listener refused connections with the following error. No appropriate service handler found. The connection descriptor used by client was this one, but I am unable to provide the connections. Why so? Why such a issue it is producing? Because so many users are requesting at the same time, but still our code is properly opened connections and closed, right sir? Of course we did in a correct way, but the problem is it is not able to fetch connections as faster as for loop execution. You know for loop how much fast it will execute. So you are executing this loop, that is fine, but here this code is not able to fetch connections. Similarly, if you understand here, instead of for loop, when number of concurrent users are 1000 users request your application dynamically, when actual end users request your application dynamically here, right? When they try to execute the similar logic, obviously the same exception they will see. They are going to see the same exception here in this scenario also. So how we can sort out this problem? So to address this issue, connection pools concept given. You can create pool of connections. Using that connections also you can execute your logic. Now the same application turns like this. Now I'll do CRUD operations using connection pool. Now in this scenario, you are not going to fetch any connection from database. Instead you fetch connections from database. This logic need to get connection from data source. How we write that logic, sir? Just if your class is having data source object, okay, if your class is having data source object, data source means connection pool. You know how we will get data source, sir? Auto wire it. Who will create it, sir? You need to create. Just auto wire data source into your class and use this data source object here to open connection. You need not to write this first statement, second statement to open connection. I need a connection. Okay, ask a connection pool. Ask data source dot get connection. Now you need to use here data source dot get connection. What it will do? It will give you a connection from connection pool. Where this connection pool resides, sir? Within your application only. Connection pool objects resides within your application only. Oracle is not your neighbor, but connection pool is your neighbor. It is there in your application itself. So you can borrow connection from connection pool. You can get connection from connection pool quickly. It will give you because it is there just within your application itself. When you call get connection, it will give you connection now from this connection pool. You'll be getting connection from connection pool. How much time it will take? Very minimal, within fraction of seconds. It will open, this is not right term, it will return connection to you. It will return, or it will send connection. When you call for connection, right, it will send connection to you. It will give you a connection. It will send connection to you. It will give you a connection. Okay sir, I'm executed. I'm done with my select statement. Where that select statement executed, sir? Obviously all your insert statements or select statements will go and execute on database only, right? If you have any statements, select or insert or update, those all will be executed on your database only. All your CRUD operations will be executed on DB itself. Finally, when you return connection, when you call connection dot close, right, instead it is returning back your connection. What it will do, it will return connection back to connection pool. Once this CRUD operation is executed, it just return connection to connection pool. So your connection will be returned back to connection pool. Return connection to pool itself. Connection pool is a simple Java object only, okay? That is like your collection object. If you remember collections, right? How collection list or set or map holds other objects. Similar way, connection pool also will hold your connection objects. From that collection, you are getting a connection here and again returning back that connection to connection pool only. So it will take very minimal time to return you connection and to close the connection. Like before, whatever challenge you have, open connection and to close connection, it was taking very long time. Now it is not going to take that much time. Now it is not going to take that much time. It will give you connection from connection pool and it will return back connection to connection pool. It will not disturb database. Database only during startup time, while you are initializing your application itself, it will return all the required connections to you. Then database will not bother about each connection. You need not to ask database give me connection every time. You need not to do that. During deployment time itself, you got all the connections here. Just utilize them here. Is that simple to implement connection pool? Yes. Let me show you simple connection pool implementation. Connection pool. There are so many providers. I'll explain about that providers, okay, who are providing connection pool. I'll just connect with the same Archil database and show you how fast it will execute the same operations. JDBC 14. You can see one jar file I have here, Tomcat DBCP. This is one connection pool jar file, okay. Connection pool jar file, Tomcat DBCP is one connection pool jar file, and I have some other providers implementations also. Let me use this Tomcat. Given that there is one more implementation, Hikari connection pool. We will be using Hikari connection pool in Spring Boot applications. By default we will be using that. And there is C3P0 library also. I have combo pool data source. Yeah, it's okay. Let me add them, okay. I'm adding Hikari connection and Tomcat DBCP also. Let me use DBCP connection. How to create, sir? Simple. Same implementation I will add here. For that, I will create connection pool. Instead of fetching connections here, right, I'll give a connection pool object to this method. Public static data source, a singleton object I am creating. Create a data source. So this method will create a data source object, connection pool object. How do I create it? Simple. Apache given a basic data source object, basic data source equal to new basic data source, data source dot set a driver, class name, data source dot set URL, data source dot set username, set a password. Now along with your database credentials, driver name, URL, username, passwords, you can ask how many maximum connections you want in your connection pool. So I want 15 connections. Let's put it. Data source can do one more great job, set max waiting time also. If connections are really busy, it can hold a user without producing exception. I am setting 2 seconds. 2 into 1000 milliseconds, 2 seconds. Up to 2 seconds, it can hold a user without any exceptions. Finally return data source. So I am creating a data source object here and returning it. Let me do this. If data source is null, then I'll be initializing it and returning it. Okay, yeah, simple singleton mechanism I used. And instead of writing this much logic, you need not to open a connection using driver manager. Instead, right, I can use data source. You just use data source here. So this data source will give you connection. So you will be getting connection here from data source dot get connection. That's it. Remaining statements, everything I am executing same. Just avoided class dot for name and driver manager dot get connection. Now the same logic I am executing here for 1000 times. Excuse me. So for 1000 times I am executing it and trying to fetch the user and printing their names here. Iteration count. Let me run it. I got exceptions, null pointer exception. Acha. Fine. This is code problem, okay? Now let's run it again. For 1000 users, will it give any issues or smoothly it will execute? See, iteration count until 0 to 999 it is executed. I don't see even single exception. For 1000 iterations, no, not even single exception. Let me increase count to 10,000 users. Whereas first code JDBC code was unable to execute at least 20 users. But now see this connection pool implementation, concurrent users, how many? Almost 10,000 users requested now. Still it is executed perfectly fine. Almost for all the users. Console is not able to show you, but without any exception it is able to executing it. What if I increase this count to 1 lakh? It will never scare. Give 1 lakh, 10 lakhs, any number of concurrent users can request your application. It will not fail to serve. See, not even a single exception. Almost 39,000, 40,000, 50,000 reached. If it is a direct connection from database, obviously you will be seeing so many exceptions here. So in real time we never use any direct connection based logic. See, 1 lakh connections seamlessly executed with simple database which is having maximum 20 connections. So what did I added additionally here? Connection pool implementation. Rather than fetching direct connection here from driver manager, I am trying to fetching connection from DataSource. DataSource is a connection pool implementation. This connection pool implementation can able to hold your connections. It can able to hold your connections into a pool object. From there it can serve to you. From there it can able to serve to you. For first 20 users it will consume connections. Just imagine 1000 requests we did there. So it will consume all the connections. 1000 connections consumed. Immediately all 1000 connections again will go back to connection pool. They will become free once 20 users execution is done. So it will go to green. Then it will serve to next 20 users immediately. So like this, right? This completely connection pool is going to share the same connections to all the users. It will give the connections, it will free up them, it will give, free up, give, free up. Finally, once you're done with all 1000 iterations or 1 lakh iterations, all your connections will become free. Still, they are not returned to database. Those connections are available in your application itself. In the first scenario, each and every connection we are fetching from database and returning it to database. So this is very bad practice, okay? In real time, this is bad practice when we have concurrent users. Suppose like a web application. Okay, so always we go with connection pools only. I'll show you example using a Spring. I'll show you example using Spring. Same logic, right? Same initialization logic. We can put it under @bean method. See here we return some logic to make it singleton. But in Spring by default it is singleton. I need not to bother about singleton logic. I need not to put all this stuff, right? I can easily use this logic in Spring based application. Let me create a Spring application here now. Okay, Spring with the connection pool. Guys, are you able to follow me? Now using Spring, I am going to show you the same implementation from controller to DAO. Let's have some packages here. com.rbu. Okay, something student management system dot config package. First configurations, then DAOs, next services and controllers. You may have web package. Let's write a configuration class, app config. You know which annotation we should use, configuration. And I need to create connection pool here. Yes, any method you can create, public, any object you can return from that method, any object you can return. You need to create a method here, method name, and finally return that object. In our scenario, I want data source object here. Finally, I want to return data source. So on this @bean method, I want to use for data source. So create any method, create data source, and you know the logic. Not a big deal. So I am adding same logic here, same data source logic. Create data source. Finally, return your data source. You are done. That's it. Connection pool implementation is done. Now you can utilize this connection pool wherever you want just by auto wiring. Now this object is eligible for auto wiring. Where do we usually do auto wiring of this connection pool object? DAO only. Sir, I have 20 DAOs, 30 DAOs throughout my application. Use it wherever you want. Student to DAO. This is my repo class. Here I have some CRUD operation methods. Public void, save, int id, string name, string email. I want to insert, sir. Insert it. I need connection, sir. Get it. How I can get? Auto void. Which one I should auto void? Data source. Where it is available? In your configuration class. Here it is available. So it can be auto wired here. How I can use? You know how to use. Data source dot get connection. You got the connection and you know what to do. Once you get the connection, use connection dot create statement, all that stuff. I got this statement. Basically they are throwing the exception. You may rethrow it. Now execute whichever operation you want. Statement dot I want to insert, execute, update, insert, into RPO experts values ID name email address. So your insert operation is done. Close your statement. Connection dot close. Sir, I am doing connection close here. Is it going to close connection really? No. When you call connection dot close, connection returns to pool only. So you need not to bother about connections are closing on database or not. It will return to pool only. So you need not to worry. See, simple. You can write any number of CRUD operations and you can use same data source across your multiple DAOs. I have student DAO, marks DAO, subjects DAO. Shall I use this same data source? Yes, you should use. Now use this DAO into your service class. Create a service class and auto-wire your DAO implementation. Student service is at the rate service and here student DAO. Similar method which is getting data from controller, just a mediator, right? Services. So here you call DAO, pass the same parameters. Service is done. What about controller? At the rate controller here you can auto wire student service. Okay, call service dot create a student. So we are done. Complete end-to-end implementation we got here. Now you need XML file to scan all these packages, correct? So let's have a resource file where I can able to scan my classes to load it into application context, right? The package name is com.rbu.sms. Yeah. Now load this into your application context. So what is our class? Controller class student controller. Insert your records. Create student. So now all the code is intact. It must work. So you may insert here for 1000 times. you don't see any issue because you are using connection pool implementation. It can able to insert unique constraint violated. Okay, so as this is a primary key, it is not able to use that because already 3 records are there, right? Let me start I from 4 or 5. Already 4 is inserted. I'll keep that I here. Okay, execution finished because it is inserted all the records. If I go back to my database and select it, I can see this Pawan records will be there for 1000 times. You can see same record got inserted without any issues. But if I would have used simple JDBC, definitely you will be seeing errors. So that is the use of connection pool. Easily we can able to manage connection resources without producing exceptions. We can improve lot of application performance also when we use connection pool. Okay, it is simple to create connection pool in Spring. Just create a configuration class under @bean method, do your initialization, that's it, and you can auto wire wherever you want. I can have hundreds of DAOs here. Into all that DAOs I can auto wire same connection because it is singleton. Whichever object is creating under @bean will execute only one time, so I need not to bother that is this going to auto wire everywhere with new object. Nothing, same object will be auto wired everywhere, and when I use data source it will give connections from connection pool only.